Good afternoon and welcome to Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. And I got some intel today for you with some guests we have today. We thought there was some big news the other night, Tuesday night in America. There were big parties in Virginia. There was a new governor, new mayor in New York. There's even a new mayor in New Haven. But it turned out, some of us weren't in the news, the place to be, the big party, the big celebration, the big news was on Whaley Avenue Marriott, where the most happening political party was allegedly happening for the election of a new alder in Ward 28. One of 5 new faces, people looking to make things happen in New Haven as newly elected alders, board alders in New Haven. We have 2 of them in the studio today, including the person behind that famous party I missed. And we'll never. I did see Bob Dylan at Toes, but I missed his party. Say good day to Shafiq Abdussabur and Devin Avshalom-Smith, who are 2 of the 5 newly elected alders in New Haven. Good morning, folks. Good afternoon, and thanks so much for coming on.
Afternoon.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you. Congratulations.
No, I'm not. I'm not the one who won. You won.
That's right.
Right, yeah. So anyway, I'd like you to get your mics closer if you don't mind. So before we're going to talk about a lot of things today, what you learned running for office for the first time and winning, that doesn't usually happen, as Bill Clinton could tell you, Barack Obama and others, and what you're planning to do as part of a team of new alders on the next couple of years in New Haven. But first, tell me about that party, Shafiq. So now, usually alders don't have their own party, right? Like
I don't know. I thought that is what you're supposed to do to, one, to honor the neighborhood of the people that voted you, bringing them together, and also the people that worked really hard on the campaign. So, this is new for me, right?
But by the way, it wasn't even remotely a criticism. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Because people don't care enough in our city, in our world, about local office. And you 2 cared so much about running for local office. You weren't picked by any group to run with saying, here's the drill, here's the agenda. You went out there and you met so many of your neighbors, and you just made the case for a new approach to handling neighborhood and citywide issues. I think everyone should have a celebration like that. But what I missed, because everyone said it was the great party. They said the mayor's party was boring.
What? I got to give a shout out to my wife, Mubaraka, who she was the 90%er. Running that, she was fierce.
Well, of course, it was great.
Yeah, she was fierce. Show, yeah. And to Hilda and to Selma, my campaign manager. I'm not a control freak to a full extent, and I try not to.
Full extent.
Yeah, and I try not to micromanage. But I was very guarded about this campaign because of brand and character and signature and what I wanted the voters, not just for Beaver Hills, but across New Haven, to feel when they heard my name and heard what I'm doing and see what I'm doing. So it was really tough for me to step away.
But it was a celebration.
Yeah, but it was
other
tough.
Celebration of one of 30 alders. Well, you're partly celebrating, like Beaver Hills, you come from, is one of the most integrated neighborhoods in New Haven. You have a strong, in fact, Orthodox Jewish community, and you have a strong black community that's been there a long time. It's not always getting along great.
That's correct.
And in the course of your campaigns, during some crime, there were some pretty heavy tensions. And one of the great things I've seen in New Haven was the way you and some other people of color united with some of the Chabad Lubavitch Jews. You put signs up about how you're working together, how you're going to take crime seriously together. You're not going to demonize anybody. And it was a beautiful thing. And did your party represent that too? Was it sort
absolutely,
of like
absolutely? I had a very strong backing from the Jewish community. From what I understand, there's about 3 different. I don't know if we want to call it branches, but there's like the conservative, and then there's like the liberal.
Oh, Shafiq, your math is way off.
Isn't my math as
There
well?
are about 5 main streams. Within each stream, there are many within Orthodox Judaism on either side.
So I've identified
Whaley Avenue. On either side, there are Jews who won't talk to each other, who are both Orthodox, who believe completely different things about the Messiah. So, like, there are so many different sects, but there's one sect in particular that has grown big in New Haven. Hundreds of new families, the Lubavitch Hasidim.
That's correct.
They believe that, like, their rabbi who died is going to be the next Messiah, which is actually antithetical to some other people. But in any case, they've rebuilt New Haven, Beaver Hills. They bought a lot of real estate. And they're kind of people, they were solidly behind you, a Muslim.
Absolutely.
And in fact, your party had no alcohol. It was the funnest party in town, and it had no alcohol.
No alcohol.
It was, that's awesome.
Listen, it was no alcohol. And yes, when I sat down with the Jewish community and the Jewish leaders and families there, what I brought to the table was, let's focus on what we have that's the same. we don't need to get off into other things.
Which is like 99% of what we have.
Yes. Let's focus on what's the same. You want what everybody else wants. You want to be safe. That's number one, because you can't do anything in the neighborhood without safety. You don't want to be attacked because of your religion, right? And you don't want to be assumed because your skin is white that you're part of some type of class structure that you don't even mentally or emotionally ascribe to, which we shouldn't even be on that anyway. So, from talking to them and of course having a long-standing relationship with them as a previous civil servant, as an officer, working as an officer there and then becoming an interim district manager, hey, look, the proof was in the pudding. And it was
so
easy.
Devin, Avshalom, how did you celebrate winning? First of all, how did you feel? Because some people, campaigns are tough, and you sometimes feel exhausted. Sometimes you feel exhilarated. You had a great team of community management team members, sort of like, tell me if I'm wrong about this, like a lot of women who are my age, not your age, who kind of make New Hallville happen, were united on your campaign because you've worked a lot with the community management team. You've helped bring technology to the fore and some new ideas for organizing in that community. They've embraced you as a generational change maker. How did you feel, and what did you guys do afterwards? Did you go quietly have some pita bread, or did you go over to the mayor's celebration? What'd you do?
Well, first, I have to acknowledge my team, because without them, this victory could not have happened. Specifically, my campaign manager, Ms. Jeanette Sykes, Kim Harris, and so many others. My mom, Darlene Smith. But what we did was we went to the mayor's party at Temple Grill, and we got our own table and ordered food and just enjoyed one another's company.
Okay, so now that you're a politician, I'm going to get you on the record. You're going to have to answer tough questions. Was it a boring party at Temple Grill?
It was not. It was
not, because I heard it was not quite like Shafiq's at the Marriott.
Well, look,
I'm just being honest here. You're on the spot here.
It's hard to match up with Shafiq on any day. But no, it was a good time had by all, and it was really, at least at our table, a real sense of community, being together, and family.
Community and family, that's a big part. We don't think of politics that way, except sometimes it's something not nice tribalism that we're seeing in America. But, people don't always know how hard it is to become an alder. So 30 alders, a lot of times, there's no opposition. And even though Shafiq technically didn't have opposition, he, in fact, did have to build an independent team, and an incumbent went away. So there was competition. And that getting, what did you each get, about 300 votes?
I got 389 votes, which was 91% of the votes.
And Devin, how many did you get?
At the polls, we got 344 votes, and there are about another at least 77 absentee ballots in the bank.
So people, I think, don't realize that. I had to learn that, and Chanel Goldson says, congratulations, Devin. I've been, as a reporter, I'm always amazed how hard it is to elect an alderperson. Now, if you're part of a team and there's not opposition, or they have a citywide organization, that's one thing, right? And I'm not putting that down, by the way. Unite Here organized a citywide group in 2011 that was electing alders, and they went to all the neighborhoods. They had their team. You have an infrastructure people or in the old days, they had the Democratic Town Committee, which isn't what it used to be, who used to knock out in your wards. In New Hallville, they knocked out, I remember, Chuck Allen for being outspoken. They get the team in. But to be an independent person, and Devin talked about the team, it's hard getting 100 votes. I know it, Patricia Kane's this really active community organizer. She's fantastic. She meets everybody. She makes things happen. And for her to get 100 votes, and she didn't win, was a lot of work. The person who went against her didn't have to do that. It's not a put down against her. She's an incumbent Democrat. Everybody's going to win. You have to identify. Did you each do ones and twos? Did you have a list? Did you know everyone who was voting? Did you have 20 people who had different streets assigned?
I'm going to let him go first.
How do you do that, Devin?
Well, for me, it was really meeting people exactly where they were, where they are, and that was going door to door to door to their homes. Yes, I did keep track of who I had good conversations with, who was in strong support. But what it was for me was being out there on the doors 50 hours a week, using up my vacation time, my personal time, to make sure that I, most importantly, listened to my neighbors. So it wasn't so much for me about just going to get support. It was really, I needed to know what people wanted to see done and what they wanted an alder to do for them.
And how about you, Shafiq? Did you have a list of ones and twos, meaning one meeting most likely to vote, two most?
So under the concept of the science of it, I had a list of ones and twos that actually lasted for about 2 weeks. And I went back and defaulted to what I believe what the people wanted. You know, it wasn't hard.
Well, in the end, you didn't have a candidate against you. Devin ran twice.
Yeah.
He had 2 opponents in the primary and 1 in the general. We'll get back to
Well,
that.
the difference was for me, Paul, was that I did not know the status of the current alder, you know, whether or not they were going to run until like days before the Democratic nomination.
Right, so you were in effect running a competitive campaign.
We ran this campaign and we made a pledge to the voters and the donors. We didn't care who stepped out to run against us. We were going to run all the way to the polls like a out of control freight train all the way until November 2nd. So we didn't really care who was going to run. It was just like the train is moving. And that's how we ran the race.
Now it's November 4th and the train is moving because we have 5 new elected alders who are really fired up people who have done a lot in our community, and now they're going to bring their talents and vision to the Board of Alders for a new day. 2 of them are on our show here today in Dateline, New Haven, WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. Devin Avshalom-Smith, the new alder in Ward 20, right?
20.
I always get 20 and 21 mixed up. In New Hallville, and Shafiq Abdussabur, Ward 28 in Beaver Hill. So I'm going to ask you both to think about a big takeaway from the campaign trail, something you learned, you might not have expected would have happened, that taught you about politics. Shafiq, you go first.
My big takeaway is I truly believe from the people that I've talked to, my campaign advisor, Chris Campbell, who's in Colorado, who really was significant in helping navigate my campaign. And he was giving me like, you know, the Washington, D.C. Intake. You know, we were going to do some things with this campaign because of COVID. And we were really looking to go audio, visual, and so forth.
That's right. You did a lot of Facebook Live stuff.
Yes.
What did you learn about that campaigning? Because it is kind of tough when you're not looking at the person.
So what I learned is if you run a one-dimensional campaign in 2021, you're going to lose. That's what I learned. You have to run a multifaceted campaign from Facebook to door. Your phone got to be open. Twitter, sending out mail-outs. You've got to connect with that voter on every single assumption, because you got some people who have cell phones, but they don't like text, but they do email, and they don't do email, and they do text. So if you just assume, I'll just put it on Facebook because, you know, if Facebook was a country, it'd be the largest country in the world. Well, everybody's not doing Facebook. I did some other things, and I'll share this one little thing. You know, I studied FDR. I've been studying FDR for like the last 3 years, and how
maybe the only older candidate who's been looking at the Works Progress Administration.
Yeah. And I studied FDR. I mean, you know, his camp, what he did as a president was very significant. He had a depression. He had to get people back to work, and we can see things like the tunnel on the Merritt Parkway was built during the Depression. The castle on top of Sleeping Giant was built, and they carried the rocks up, and that was part of the workforce labor. And one of the things he did was the fireside chats. So I adopted the Beaver Hills Table Talks, which tonight I'll be doing it about 7 o'clock.
All right.
And those were the things that I realized that needed to happen.
The only thing we have to fear is what itself?
Inaction.
All right. Devin Avshalom-Smith, what's something you learned on the campaign trail maybe caught you by surprise?
This didn't really catch me by surprise, but a big takeaway from me was that Ward 20 residents love their neighborhood and they love their neighbors, and they want their voice to be heard. That was a resounding cry throughout my talking to hundreds of people. Folks wanted to know that what they thought, what they felt as needs for themselves and their families were of concern to someone in a position to do something about it and advocate for them. And that was the most heartwarming
How about
part.
specifically? You knew they'd be concerned about crime.
Mm-hmm.
You might have known that, I don't learn this till I go out and interview people, that they really cared about those overhanging trees that block the lights and make everyone feel unsafe in public works, which is a really big deal. Shafiq had a lot of that too in the tree stumps. You knew they were going to talk about the Bassett Street former state welfare building and what's going to go there because the idea for co-op laundry, which is a really wonderful idea, is not going to happen. Any issues surprised you that you heard?
Well,
it's off. They
You're
finished
not
it.
going to
it's
a
over.
bomb on it.
No, it's over. We reported it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, my
They killed
God.
it.
What are they going to put there?
Over.
What are they going to put there?
They don't know. It's back to square one.
Maybe some bike lanes.
Shafiq, man, you got to read the Independent.
They're going to put some bike lanes there.
I'd say I was.
They got the trail right there.
I was actually very surprised to find the frequency with which folks had concerns about quality of life issues like potholes, traffic calming, trees, sidewalks. It was mentioned just as much as gun violence.
Yes.
That's
So
interesting.
what I learned is definitely in service of the community, a multifaceted approach has to be taken.
Yes.
It's never just one thing or another.
Now, at the end of the campaign, there was a last-minute smear campaign against you, which you probably had figured it might come up, it might not. But they waited until the last 2 weeks, and there really was no chance you were going to lose until this was brought up. So it was shared around that you're transgender, so you're going to be the first transgender member of the Board of Alders. Congratulations on that. How did it come up at the end, and how did you deal with it?
Well, so first I want to say I'm proud of who I've become. And I've never tried to hide anything. I've always been open and forthcoming. I've dedicated myself to helping others, and most importantly, to the people of my ward and the residents of New Haven. Yes, you're correct, Paul.
I started hearing it. Like, look at this article. There was a very compelling and wonderful article I'd like to share with people about when you were at George Washington University in 2009 and the discrimination you faced. It was interesting till the end, where it kind of makes you cry about some things experienced. But so that got passed around as though it was something bad.
That's what was shocking to me. What was shocking to me was that something that really ended up being something that led to progress back in DC was being used to try to harm me. More than anything, it hurt because it was being used as like a political tool. And what hurts me about that is all I kept thinking was, wow, just a few weeks ago, our first graders were playing at Lincoln Bassett School, and there was active shooting first.
Right.
Then a couple weeks later, a rogue pit bull bit one of our children.
About 10 days
afterwards. Yeah. And all I kept thinking was, this is probably the least important thing going on. My
3 weeks before that,
life.
A young man, a homeowner, mind you, a homeowner, was literally like assassinated coming out of his driveway.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and this is the signature of New Haven politics. That's why I said a fast-moving train.
So, Devin, when this came up, how did you? Now, you knew it might, right?
Yes.
And how did you deal with it? Like, where did you start hearing about it, and what did you decide to do?
Well, one, I didn't want to give the negative aspect that my opponents were trying to use any life. Because, like I said, there's more important issues to discuss. But what I did do is I had one-on-one conversations with my supporters, with residents of the ward, and, you know, talk to them, asking them how they felt, ensuring them that my agenda is and will always be a community-first agenda, that I'm the same person today as I was yesterday. I'm the same person that during the pandemic walked door to door, handing out flyers, lifting food pallets in order to feed over 250,000 meals to our neighborhood with very little help. I'm the same person that has just a big heart and love for my neighborhood.
But I mean, did you say, because some people say I have to make a speech. I think you were very smart not to make it a big public issue because it wasn't a close enough election. All that would do would be to magnify it. I didn't think it was newsworthy for that reason. But other politicians, if it were like a race to the end, what were the reactions you got with these one-on-one? Like, did you ever think I'm going to have to go on Facebook and say something? Or,
well, you know, the reactions I received from residents, and I really want to take this moment to thank them from the bottom of my heart, because it was a really hard time for me. You know, it's personal, private information. I didn't see how it was relevant to the Alder race, but the reaction that I got was overwhelming support and love. From young folks to older folks. I mean, obviously not everyone agrees and is on the same page as far as that goes, but primarily people welcomed me into their homes and hugged me and said, look, you know, your personal life is your personal life.
That's right.
I want you to make sure you address that cracked sidewalk in front of my house.
That's right.
And so I'm trying to wonder as an outsider whether to be kumbaya, happy what happened, or is that's not realistic. So Chuck Allen, who I knew very well, was an alder in New Haven for years, and he did a long interview with me after he left office about how he was gay, but because the conservatism of the black church, people used that against him a lot, and he felt he couldn't be out about it. Have times changed? Did you feel this was a happy story that New Hallville didn't let this interfere with an election?
I think that times have changed in that we can't underestimate the progressive minds of many of the residents of Ward 20, in that odds are someone is affected or has someone in their family who has a similar or shared experience among this spectrum. I think that there is still a ways to go. However, I ask people to judge me by the content of my character. I'm a human.
Do you think you lost any votes? Because you really won with an overwhelming amount.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I did. I'm sure I'll find out if I did. But I just ask everyone to, look at me and what I do. Look at my work ethic. Look at the level of commitment and dedication I have to my community, and to remember that, yeah, I am a person. When someone cuts you, it hurts. But I know that this mission, what I'm here to do for my community, is much bigger than any facet of my personal life.
And I just want to ask one more question, because I'm not LGBT, so I can't understand what it's like to be living that. I had an argument with someone in your ward because we didn't feel it was newsworthy, and they said, this person's hiding who he is. And I said, no, I don't know to laugh at that. There's another person.
Crazy,
I said,
man.
I think that's so wrong.
Yeah.
Just personally, but I haven't lived it, right? Like, you weren't denying who you were, but why do you have to make a speech about the speech? I'm black. You didn't make a speech. But tell me about that. What did anyone say that to you? Did you get an accusation directly? You're not being honest?
I did hear that from a few people, and the way I look at it and characterize it is kind of the same way that you just said. We don't go out, and we used to have to. We don't go out and make a speech. I'm black, so please don't count me out because of that. And it was the same for me. I really felt like it's not a part of the community first agenda. And that's what I focus on. I'm not hiding. I wasn't hiding. I'm just a person living my life. I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. But in this world that we're living in, where so many things are used to sensationalize and divide us, what we need now is healing. What we need now is togetherness. And that's something I can always commit myself to bringing.
Can I get an amen?
You got an amen from me,
Right.
bro. I'm
done on this. Anything else you want to say? We move on. All right. You're listening to WNHH, and I think my hat's off to you, Devin. You are a brave man.
Absolutely.
And very excited that you were able to go through this and come out the other side.
Thank you, Paul.
And in New Haven, we do love each other.
Absolutely.
And we do support each other. And that's what New Haven is. The world might be going crazy, and there are crazy people in New Haven, but what we are in New Haven is a loving community. We love each other and support each other. And we talk about the tough issues and then go fight about them. So
Absolutely.
let's get to it. Okay, WNHH, New Haven Independent. Let's talk about some of those issues. What is the first thing you're going to accomplish as an alder? And the thing that 2 years later, I'm going to say you did it, you didn't do it, and give me the reason. Why don't we start with Devin?
Well, I think I can talk about the first thing I'd like to accomplish, but I want to preface that by saying, for me, that all of that comes from my community members. So I intend to have community conversations in order to be sure about what the first thing my residents want me to address. One major thing, though, that I definitely want to address is the blighted properties that we have, as well as neighborhood blight as well in regards to trash and things like that.
So now you're talking about empty houses or rundown houses, and you're talking about public spaces that are trashed or overgrown.
Yes. And so that's at the top of my list. But of course, really at the top of my list as well is public safety, gun violence. And I think that will really involve working together.
And you both have really interesting personal connections to this issue. Now, you're a member of the new Civilian Review Board, Devin.
Yes.
It's already been interesting what came up this week. There were a couple of cases where you felt the police department should take another look. There was a case where a police officer was dealing with a mentally disturbed man for an hour in a rent dispute at an office tower, which, if there's a new crisis response team, they'll probably respond. And he kept his cool. As an officer known for not necessarily keeping his cool, but he kept his cool for an hour. And then he wanted to tell the guy leave. He wouldn't leave. And then a dispute ensued. He takes the guy down. The guy kicks him. So he responds by grabbing his neck and punching him to the head 3 times. 2 interesting things about it. We got an internal affairs report this week that we published in the Independent. There was another policewoman there who did something we were told, and Shafiq correct me, that police officers are told to do. That if you think a colleague of yours is doing something wrong, you got to step in. So she was young, and she stepped in, and she stopped this guy for beating up the arrestee. That's a gutsy thing to do. And she said in the IA interview, I felt it was out of control. He didn't need to be harming him. Now, the other officer said, I took this action because those other two were useless. The other two cops, they weren't going to do nothing. They were just standing there. Someone had to deal with it. The police department came out on the side of the officer who threw the punches. The woman has been, as I understand it, if you would know better, has been ostracized. And now you're dealing with an issue where the police department said it's okay what he did because it was justified. He's allowed to do it. Because these are tough situations. He was kicked. How do you get the boy being kicked? Are we allowed to talk about that? I thought New Haven was a place I guess we're not at. We could talk about how do you get there without demonizing people. But there's a new state policy guideline Shafiq's worked on that it's not supposed to be enough that something's justified. It needs to be necessary. So, Devin, you're on the civilian review board. Where are you going with this? What do you think?
Well, I won't speak too much about it due to the fact that I'm one member of the Civilian Review Board, and I really respect the power of deliberating with my colleagues and coming to consensus because we speak as one board. But what I can say is that I appreciate the level of information that we're given. I appreciate the level of transparency that New Haven Police Department provides us when we're having these deliberations as well. And I think that there's a lot of room for growth and improvement and expanding some of these ideas around what's justified and, what actually may be sometimes a better choice.
Well, I think your subcommittee said that they wanted this case revisited, right?
Yes.
You were part of that group, and you said you wanted to question whether they need... So is the bigger question the punch in the head, which is we wrote about first, or is the bigger question the grabbing of the neck?
Well, I can only speak for myself in this. For me, the larger issue was the use of, I think it's called a head strike, and Shafiq would know better than I the terminology. I just was thinking to myself, in that situation, was there a better way? That's pretty much it as far as my thoughts go.
And just before I get to Shafiq on this, because this is a segue, we get pushed back in our comment section from officers who support the use of force, who said that you don't know what it's like till you're there, and that someone's kicked you, you got to use overwhelming force to get control. They get very upset if you question why it had to go there, and you specifically, not you, Devin, but you members of the Civilian Review Board, they say, you're not cops. You sit back there, you don't know what it's like to be a cop. How can you weigh in on that?
Well, one thing that we recently did was we underwent a number of trainings that police officers have to go through.
Interesting.
And yes, and that was illuminating. I think it's important. My goal in anything I do is to maintain impartiality. I like to take objective stances, review the facts that are in front of me so that I can make an informed decision. So I think that what we're doing with the Civilian Review Board is trying to stay on that stream so that when we're looking at what's just, we can say that there's justice being done for residents and that there's also justice for New Haven police officers who do risk their lives to serve us.
Now, Shafiq Abdussabur, you're a retired police sergeant. You were not only that, you were vice president of police union, which is
no, I was a treasurer of police union.
Sorry, forgot about that. You're the guy who had the money, but of course you kept your eye on all right. And you were in all these situations. You've had to use force. You were a sergeant.
Yes.
What do you think about this situation? Did he need to grab his head and punch him in the head? Is it dealt right? Justifiable versus necessary?
The problem with, our police department, we can't even begin to legislate oversight because the mechanism to provide oversight has been disconnected. We have not had a CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. That's correct, in the city since January.
We do have an acting one who works at it full time.
We don't. We have a chief of staff and a deputy CAO that's sharing the CAO position.
And that's a position that oversees line departments,
that's correct.
Including the police department.
So it would almost be like, hey, listen, we have an assistant chief and a captain sharing the responsibility.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be contentious, but we do have a police chief.
That's
we have
correct.
A mayor. We have
and we do have a
police
police chief and a mayor.
Civilian Review Board.
So why
they dealt with this? They did an IA. They decided not to punish the person. CRB's relooking at it. What's your take, Shafiq?
So my take is, and I don't want to sound like that person, but we don't have a public safety plan. We don't have good strategies on dealing with crime. And as a result of that, you're not going to have good strategies on managing the police department. The span of control for officers is any officer less than 5 years is 3 officers to a sergeant. Any officer that goes from 5 years and up, often preferred as 10 years. You can go to a ratio of 1 sergeant to about 5, maybe 6 officers. So when I saw the video, the first thing I'm thinking of, there's no sergeant there. There's no sergeant there. These officers are in crisis. These officers are in
But the officer who spoke up was younger, correct? The one who actually administered the punishment is more experienced.
Absolutely, but you still need... We have a young department. We need supervision out there. These officers need the ability to say, hey, this is going on, Sergeant Abdussabur. What should I do with this situation? No problem, Roger. I'm
so if you were the sergeant there, would you have said, yeah, I'm going to get some punches in too? Or
no, if I was a sergeant there and they would have called me, I would have told them to stand by. Stand by, I'm en route. And I would have showed up to that scene.
Oh, so you think you should have been a sergeant there.
And I would have showed up to that scene to help de-escalate and help them navigate through this.
So you think an officer should not have to de-escalate in that situation?
Officer should not be new officers.
But this was not a new officer.
These are new officers.
This was not a new officer.
Paul, these are new. These officers don't have 10 and 15 years on the job.
I think he had 10.
Okay, these officers, and collectively all those officers, they didn't have 10, 15 years on the job.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you. I know it's very important what you're saying. Very important.
So what I'm saying is because our department is so young, you have to supplement the lack of experience in years with a supervisor who has a different level of administrative outlook on how this situation, because when a sergeant shows up, a sergeant is supposed to be thinking, how is this going to impact us at the city level in a lawsuit, in an arrest, in a taking away from...
Is this the kind of case that would go to the community response team where you'd have a social worker come? Because they were called about a very upset person who, and we know him, he's incredibly intelligent, delusional, it kind of goes weird places. He's not violent, but he wasn't going to leave.
No, he wasn't going to leave. And and to be all honest with you, number one, there's a security guard there, right? This seemed to be more of a civil issue.
The security guard actually filmed the police and thought they were out of hand.
It seemed to be more of a civil issue than it actually was a criminal issue. It became a criminal issue because the management of that building insisted that he leaves. So it's kind of like the police are caught in a catch-22. Like when I was looking at it, I'm like, why are they being used as the eviction police? Why are they being used as eviction sheriffs? This guy has a relationship with the company. This is like an ex-employee issue. The police should not even have really been involved in that. So you put them in a situation.
What about the officer McKiernan who spoke up and then was ostracized and because her actions were not taken?
The thing, Paul, that goes with the territory. She's not the first officer to have spoken up on issues like that.
But sometimes those officers are welcomed. We just had a year-long discussion in this country where something everyone agreed on was that police officers are supposed to speak up when they see something going wrong. Yeah. This person was not supported.
Everyone that was not a cop wants that to happen. But you have to remember that law enforcement is its own culture.
Will she be able to speak up next time? Will she?
I don't know. It's gonna, it's gonna really be up to the command staff in that department. That's going to help set the tone and the environment for that. And it's going to have to be something...
Do you have confidence we have that command staff now that's setting that tone?
I have confidence that we can continue to create that type of command staff.
So that's a no.
I have...
If you have confidence that we got created, that means it's not there.
I would say currently we lack the diversity within command staff for that to happen.
Jaywan Carter says, congratulations. I hope you all are placed on committees you all choose, and the two of you have great experience prior to be electing, which... I agree with you very much, Jaywan. Thanks. You're listening to Shafiq Abdussabur, who I'm giving way too hard a time. Sorry about
That's okay.
That's okay,
well, I love
he hosts the show at WNHA, so we got him on the other side here. Devin, Avshalom-Smith, 2 new alders ready to make some good trouble. Now, you're 2 of 5. There are 5 new alders. Sarah Miller in the East Shore. Yes. In Fairhaven. Sal Punzo in the Annex, and Alex Guzne, son of Ecuadorian immigrants, a Yale student.
What at Jackson 5? I'm Tito. I just want to say I'm Tito. Tito was cool, man. Never got in trouble.
Okay. I'm having a flashback to 1987.
I was a sophomore in college in West Georgia University.
I was covering New Haven as a reporter.
Yes.
And a bunch of new alders got elected, and they weren't part of the organization. They weren't antis. They didn't run to be against anyone in power like the Democratic Town Committee. They were all women. One of them was named Tony Harp. Was named Elaine Braffman, was named Robin Krugman, was named Liz McCormick. They all defeated people or replaced people who had been part of the ruling majority. And again, they weren't against them, but they had their own independent base. There were people who did a lot in their neighborhoods. They were really known. They were smart. They had big picture. They had small picture. They went on to make a huge difference. even though there were 30 alders, I would say those 4 were each worth 6 alders.
Wow.
They didn't always work as a group. Sometimes they did. But like Tony Hart wrote the community policing. Elaine Braffman like got all these landlords like in your Ward 28. She was all after and passed laws, cutting the grass, this kind of stuff. Robin Krugman. Do you see a moment like that? Or what do you think is the significance? Now, you, Devin, you, Shafiq, and Sarah Miller are replacing people who were part of the Unite Here coalition that has the majority of the board holders since 2011. They've been running the city. They've set the agenda. They get all the votes. You 3 are stepping into roles not having been elected by them. Does that matter, Devin? Does it have any significance?
I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter. I'm pro-labor.
Mm-hmm. You work for Robin Porter at the legislature, one of the most pro-labor alders. State reps.
Yes, absolutely. I'm the clerk of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and I see firsthand how hard so many people are fighting to ensure fair work conditions, fair wages for folks. I look forward to working with everybody who's on the board of alders. So I don't know. I can't say that I see an issue. I do appreciate diversity in any room. Mm. So the fact that the 5 of us are coming in and we're sort of really homegrown, sprouting up from the grass here, from the dirt, really. I think that's empowering for certain. But for me, my primary concern is always the voices of residents of Ward 20.
Which your predecessor had, Delphine Clyburn. I think people misunderstand what it meant that it was labor. It was one union, Unite Here. And yes, they did use their control to have Yale give better contracts, which I would argue is legitimate because it has the biggest impact on poverty in our city, what the wages and benefits are at the largest employer. But they weren't in league with the teachers union. I doubt they even ever met. They had no plan on education. They weren't pals with the municipal union. They didn't use their power for a labor agenda. Somewhat because of just to be honest about my outlook and bias, I would wish they'd done more of that. So it wasn't really about labor. It was at a group of good people who are committed, had a combined agenda, and it's kind of petered out. They're no longer the people who elect everyone. So I'm very interested to see what happened. And what about you, Shafiq? Where do you see the Jackson 5, Tito?
Well, I'm with Devin. There's been a lot of chatter about Shafiq going down to the Board of Alders. I've had a lot of people bullying me, trying to scare me, and
really,
nothing's going to get. I don't want to talk about.
No, you got no.
No, I can't talk about it.
Who's trying to bully you?
I'm not going to. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's just the atmosphere, right?
That's the one way to get you to do what they don't want you
to do. So
I
relate back to how I got onto the police department. I started, as you know, as an advocate, as an activist.
You were a group of Muslims who were protesting the lack of police presence near St. Ray's Hospital.
That's correct.
And the police chief at the time said, "Hey, you should be a cop."
That's correct. Right? So, I went into the police department as a activist, and over the years, was able to become a sergeant and change legislation and become a national.
You got along with everybody.
Right. So I believe that training and that skill set is what I will be bringing to the Board of Alders.
What about, are you 5? What is the significance of the Jackson 5?
I think the significance of all of us is that uniquely we are representing our wards in our own spaces. But when we do come together, we find that there's a common balance and a common theme.
Have the 5 of you gotten together?
No, I spent some lately. I've been spending more time with Devin. I've met with Sarah Miller, and the other 3 candidates I have not.
But have the 3 of you talked about trying to do any stuff together?
No,
because 3 people can accomplish a lot on the Board of Alders.
There's been no. So for the sitting alders there, don't worry.
Come on,
we're not planning a coup d'état.
The elders of the protocol of the Jackson 5.
Yeah, we're not planning a coup d'état. But I could tell you what I plan to do. People are dying in this city. And we have divided our politics and policies in this city are making black and brown people poorer, more disenfranchised, disconnected from generational wealth. And we are selling New Haven for $1 to anybody that's from out of town that is not black and brown. That's disgusting. That's a problem. Black men dying in the street. Hispanic Latino men are dying in the street. We are getting shot on a daily basis. Grandmothers, mothers and children and others are getting run down like Grand Theft Auto on our roadways. That's, in a nutshell, That's my agenda.
And when I've seen you, like when you give your 10-point plan for crime, I can
Absolutely.
tell how much you feel this and how personally you take it, to the extent sometimes where you, as a cop, as a community organizer, you feel kind of take it personally about saving lives. How's that going to work as an alder?
That's my job. That's our job.
But how does an alder do that?
How does no policy? And we just got to call it out to the table. We can't be like, I, nay, whatever. And you know what? It may be, if something's on the agenda and everybody else can't get on it, you know what might happen? You might see the Jackson 5 or whoever step outside the chambers and do an impromptu press conference and inform the people about what's going on.
What committee do you want to be on public safety?
I don't really know. I mean, I want to be where it's effective.
And you can go to any committee meeting, by the way. Committee meetings when it's happening.
Here's what I'm going to say. You know, sometimes alders come in and they say, oh, you know what? The hot alders. So we'll call up Jackson 5 the hot alders. And we'll come in and they'll say, hey, let's put you on a committee. Maybe we need to be looking at the leadership positions. You know, what are the leadership positions on the board?
You want to be president of the board?
No, I didn't say that. But there's several leadership positions on the board of alders. There's majority. Yeah. There's the deputy majority.
And there is precedence for that after 2011. Devin, you have any committees you got your eyes on?
Well, not really. That, again, for me, will come from Ward 20 residents. For me, Ward 20 residents will be involved in every part of this process for me. Every decision I make, I plan on working hard to make sure that I get their input.
Harry Joss says you guys are the insurgents. We're running out of time.
Get out of here, Harry.
American Rescue Plan. We're getting over $100 million. Some of it's called for, a lot of it's not spoken for. It's a question about what do you do short term. We did some summer program. They're trying to make long-term investments that actually pay for themselves many times over. I have heard anyone talking about down payments on getting rid of our pension obligations over the long term. I haven't heard anyone talking much about fiber optic besides a measly $1 million for a study for something we're trying to do for 7 years, why 300 communities in the country have given their businesses and their low-income residents amazing economic opportunity. That's my speech. I'm not an alder. Where do you want to see done with the American Rescue Plan?
Well, along the lines of sustainable investment in the community. Ward 20 residents have told me that they're interested in something being decided around the state building that we have.
Right. Bassett Street, the former state welfare office. It was going to be the welfare co-op. Even though Shafiq kind of read the story, it's dead. What do you want to see done there?
Well, residents have told me that they'd like to see workforce training, some sort of community center where services can be accessed by community members. I think that overall what I'd like to see with the American Rescue Plan funds is a serious investment in Ward 20, in New Hallville, in the other depressed communities. This is our opportunity.
But what kind of investment?
Yeah, I'd like to see investment in workforce training programs, youth programming, also senior citizen assistance, and also in investment as far as deeply affordable housing. I mean, we have organizations like Beulah Land Development Corporation and Concorp who have in their mission, they're looking to assist and
they get it done.
And they get it done for black and brown people and poor people.
Hallville, I think of New Hallville as a place where people get it done.
We get it done. We work
Some
hard,
of those people who worked with you, when I think about what happened at what used to be the Mud Hole, the big drug dealing gang place, which is now the beautiful greened and community gathering space by Hazel Street in Shelton, and that was all community power. That was all people who cared about environment, who cared about youth. And when I ride my bike by there, I always see something good happening with people. Can government dollars do that, or do they need to supplement the people already doing that?
The people who are already doing that absolutely need to be supplemented. They need to be first in line when it comes to these fundings. What we have with these folks who are doing this work is a wealth of on-the-ground knowledge about what works, what doesn't work. And then we bring in experts from various areas within the city and even outside in order to figure out how to make these plans and projects sustainable for our community.
Okay, Alders-Elect Shafiq Abdussabur, you now have $100 million. What are you going to do with it?
Well, like I said at the beginning of my campaign, we need to have career pathways for our youth, which is trade jobs. We need to bring them back into school. And we need to have a system where a freshman comes to school for his first day or her first day or their first day, and they can actually see 100 pathways of career success in the school system. Go to school for your first 2 years, and then your second year, you start your career pathway job, and you go to trade school for the other half of your day. We bought the armory for $23 million about 10 years back. It's sitting there. Half of it is ready to go. Let's take some money and start a pilot trade program there. Let's turn Riverside High, which is a social promotion school where we're just socially promoting people and they're not being able to get a job. Put a trade school there. The mayor has proposed $12 million in this crime initiative, buy cameras and all this other stuff. Take that $12 million, divide it by 10 police district, and give every community district $1.2 million and let them decide on how they want to do crime. Take $20 million, divide it by 4, and give $5 million to local minority developers so they can build tiny home house community for homeless people rather than them trying to put 100 of them down at Pond Lily and those other roach-infested hotels that they're about to put them in for the winter.
You know, I cranked up the music for this.
I know you did.
Because, folks, you just got a taste. We could go hours here, hours up. You just heard two of the most exciting new voices out of 5 coming on the board of Alders. And I know we're going to have a better city next year because you two are getting going.
Paul, I just want to say thank you very much. And to everyone out there, to Ward 20, to everyone who supported me, let's put love first. And thank you for all the love you
We are
shown.
definitely putting love first.
Absolutely.
Now it's time for the details.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
Joining. Devin, Avshalom-Smith, Shafiq, Abdussabur,
A better
Alders-Elect.
Beaver Hills. A better Beaver Hills.
We're going to be hearing a lot more for you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your comments, folks. Harry, sorry I didn't get to your COVID question. It was a good one. We're going to take it out, speaking about leading with love, with the Afro-Semitic experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free.
I heard Harry became a Democrat because I won now.
From the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with love with us all day and all night long. WNHH. New
What's your
Haven's
gift,
home
man?
For community radio.